Hello, how's it going, everyone? So I wanted to make a quick video about the deliberate dumbing down of people in reference to a person's comment about the need for government. One argument that people often will say about government is that government kind of is a barrier to help prevent the dumb, sheepish masses from becoming violent and giving into animalistic instincts and uprisings and bickerings. And the flaw in this line of reasoning, that people are largely dumb animals, comes from a misunderstanding of the evolution of human ethics and intellect from a historical perspective. And where this really comes into play is taking a look at the modern education system. And point of reference for those who want to follow along and do more reading is visit a website called deliberatedumbingdown.com. And you can get this incredible book for free called The Deliberate Dumbing Down, yeah, like that alliteration there. Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. And it goes through a historical analysis about how Americans of particular interest are intentionally dumbed down by the government to become effectively worker bees, or to be I guess you could say, a distinct intellectual lower class. And this is especially as done to the public education system. I have a little bit of insight into this because my dad was a school teacher in public education inner city for 30 years. He got to see what changes happened, especially from the 70s through just past 2000. So I have both, personal perspective knowing about this, and I also have the research and historical perspective. And I'm not going to go elaborately through it because there's just so much information. Really, you need to take a look at that book and use that as kind of a frame of reference to begin your own research. But the short of it is that government, especially post 1930s and 40s, began to institute regimes in education to dumb people down. Part of that is removing the philosophical discourse out of school. In other words, students are not really allowed to think about how information is gathered, how to do critical analysis. Much of what is done is rote memorization, catering to standardized tests and things like that. There isn't a Renaissance-styled element to school as once was. And you can actually see some of this historical development in terms of intellect and dumbing down if you look at some of the educational literature, that is scholastic literature, from the late 1800s on to about the early 1900s. So we're looking, 1870s through 1930s, 40s, even you can even touch barely in the 50s. Take a look at this period. And a great note about this period is this period is, it's surprising to many people who don't know about this, but is a period when much of the foundational grand scale mathematical formulas were kind of put together. You look at a lot of the mathematical research that took place, physics research that took place in the early 1900s, and a lot of the foundational concepts that are used today came from that time period. It's pretty crazy to think about. A lot of people think that era like, oh, country bumpkin people. It's like, no, some of the biggest developments in human history came about during that time. And the reason that is because there was still an open air about education. Education began to be manipulated through NGOs, especially non-governmental organizations. In other words, philanthropic not-for-profits and other type of governmental influencing organizations, which were effectively tax-exempt organizations funded by some of the more elite persons of the day. You can think like Carnegie or Rockefeller, those kind of grants and scholarships and things like that. Those educational regimes which help push and influence education, of course, in America, leading up to changes in policy, really help to put people into a worker class learning environment instead of a grander critical thinking skill environment. And people today try to critique and say, oh, well, without government, people are just going to be stupid animals and always committing violence. We need, some sort of greater, hand to curtail the dumb masses. And the funny thing is it's the government that stopped the growth of intellect that was really churning up during the early part of the 20th century. it was a beautiful thing. There was intellectual renaissance during that period, and government came in to curtail that. And one of the reasons it did that, and that is it, as in the people did that, is because to have philosophical discourse also means the ability to question the status quo. You can't question the legitimacy of government action uh, when those who are funding and creating the action are in control of the education. They don't want to be critiqued. They don't want themselves to have a critique about their nature of being, whether they're just or unjust, or whether they're effective or ineffective. And to have young people have that channel of intellect opened up would undermine the government's goals and the corporate government partnership cronyism, those goals to create a working underclass. Meanwhile, the elite, of course, can go to better private schools where more critical thinking is taught, and better business and reasoning skills are taught. And so pulling this all together, the short of it is that it's not an issue that there are these dumb masses that need to be handled by some big force to keep things from total chaos. And anarchy is not chaos. Anarchy is just no automatic mandatory rulers, no forcible taxation, no theft. It is this issue is something that is created by the government's halting of growth. The evolution of ethics, that is the evolution of people working toward more peaceful means of interaction, peaceable trade, has been halted by the interests of government in trying to preserve itself as an institution, and the interests of the controlling I'll say elite, to generalize, the larger corporate holders who don't wish to have competition. Free enterprise is not immoral. To trade is not immoral where it's voluntary. It is the use of force to stop competition that is immoral, and that's what happened. Is these other organizations wanted to keep other entrepreneurs, you could say, people from rising up to compete, and that halt to critical thinking, that halt to growth, is what makes people look today around all these jokes and memes about Justin Bieber fans and other types of pop culture references. People that are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm watching Rich Kids of Beverly Hills, or like Desperate Housewives and all these other reality show TV bullcrap. When people think about the dumbing down of the discourse. And that includes even in the news, how the news is dumbed down to the lowest common denominator. It didn't used to be that way. People were growing their intellect at leaps and bounds. And if you look at what kids were tested on in elementary school in the late 1800s, early 1900s, I mean, the kids of today would probably couldn't pass it if they were in college. You have to really look back in time and see where things were going and see the trends, and then to see the change in trend to get an idea about what's going on. You can't say, oh, we need this thing, when the thing is, that is the government, but the thing is going to be breaking your legs and then offer you the wheelchair after trying to sell you the wheelchair. It's causing the problem, and it's offering the solution. It's creating a reaction from people and then it wants to set itself up as the savior. It's Hegelian dialect. It's problem, reaction, solution. So with that in mind, this issue of chaos, you could say, without this overbearing entity to smack people down whenever there's anything, it's just not there. Part of being human and having mistakes and growing does come with some violence, of course, throughout history. But those changes create learning experiences, learning opportunities, and better ways to do things. And what happened is that the government stopped that. It stopped the growth. It pulled it down a bit, changed the channeling. And people often miss that because they haven't done the research, and all the history textbooks or textbooks today are written to take out those past elements and aspects of how things used to be and what types of discourses were had. This isn't to say that the past was perfect. I'm not looking to have some sort of, idyllic past to return to. This is rather a description of what was going on intellectually in terms of growth and how that was halted, and why people miss that out when they're trying to calculate, oh, we need to have this big ruler, to this big daddy to keep everybody in line. The big daddy is the entity that is preventing the natural selection for stupidity. Subsidization of stupidity leads to a breeding of stupidity. When people are rewarded for using reason and intellect and caution, and people are rewarded for risk-taking when it produces value to others, that's when you have growth. When people are sheltered from being able to make choices or to reap the full benefits of their mistakes or rewards, that's when you subsidize the ignorance. And that's what we have today, is we have subsidized ignorance, mandated ignorance. You can't go into the public education system and really get a robust educational discourse on all areas of life, because there are limits that they're going to set. It's not to say that you can't learn stuff about material science or English or literature or anything. It's to say that there are caps in areas, and they're very intentional caps to keep people from evolving ethically, outgrowing their masters. And until people realize that and wake up to that, it's going to keep going downhill. So fortunately, we've had a counter lever with the internet, and that people have been able to have access to information and start to read and learn and put together the history and put together the pieces and see where the lies are coming through. But even as it's been growing exponentially fast, we have a government that is exponentially putting people into slavery and really trying to push back the executive branch. So scary stuff, but hopefully this helps you learn more about the history of education and how government is used to dumb people down and make them feel a sense of codependency.